get to Saturday, the 14th of October, 1066, early in the morning, probably around 9 a.m. William came upon Harold before his army was in order, says the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. What does that mean?
Well, what I assume it means is that William's forces, of course, had concentrated since landing at Pevensey and moved up into further up into Sussex. Harold was probably still assembling more forces, and he was probably assembling them too close to where William's army was, which gave William the opportunity to attack, while Harold probably would have wanted to wait and, of course, hope to win through major or massive, possibly even a massive numerical advantage. Yeah.
Well, this sort of life or death struggle, and the battle known by some as the Battle of Senlac Hill, was to last until late in the afternoon. Could you give us a description of the two armies and which were, in your opinion, the key moments of the battle? Because there are all sorts of discrepancies between sources. On one hand, we have William of Poitiers, then we have the Carmen. So could you please just give us a brief overview of the situation on the battlefield that morning?
Yes. Well, on that morning, the first point, which is really a recommendation to anyone listening to this interview to visit battle. Of course, the English army was assembled on a ridge, up above where William was assembling his army. So we have to think in terms of Harold occupying what was arguably a defensible position, a very good defensive position. And for William to win the battle, he had to disrupt the English position with a view to eventually defeating them. I'm inclined to believe the stories of feigned retreats, but what of course is important, and I should have mentioned first, is that the Normans did have cavalry, whereas the English didn't. It was an entirely infantry army, and this is very clear on the Bayeux Tapestry, and indeed in other sources. So William's purpose was really to try to disrupt the English, and in many ways the key moment was when the English advanced down the hill, possibly believing that they were going to win, or possibly because discipline had failed, and the tapestry in recording the deaths of Gurth and Leofwin, Harold's brothers, is actually probably telling us that the leadership and the lines of communication of Harold's army had been disrupted. So we have a moment, a crucial moment, and it's a very long battle. It lasts for several hours. We have a crucial moment at which the Normans are able to go on to the attack against a disorganized force. And of course, this does lead in due course to Harold's death.
I'm glad you mentioned Harold's death, because there's quite a lot of I'd say controversy about the way in which he lost his life. The tapestry, for example, shows us how the king was felled by an arrow that hit him in the eye. A depiction which, if I recall correctly, was backed up by several chroniclers. While the tapestry is open to interpretation, because we don't know exactly which figure is actually Harold. And even if, let's say, we accept the fact that he's the one in the upright position grasping the shaft of the arrow, the arrow itself is a point of contention, since the tapestry was restored in the 19th century.
Indeed.
Well, then, so if we leave the tapestry aside, we have the Carmen, another, let's say, contemporary source, which gives us a totally different account. William caught sight of Harold on top of the hill and set out with a few of his men to kill him, and then continues with the graphic description of the injuries inflicted on Harold. How do you think he died? Because I know you've spent so much time studying this, and I think it would be great to have
Mm.
your point of view on Harold's death.
Yes, yes, my yes. In the end, my point of view is ultimately again the one that we probably in the end don't know. Yeah, and never will know. I mean, you've described admirably the problems of interpreting the tapestry for various reasons, and the prelude to the battle illustrates this very well. Um, I'm confident that the designer of the tapestry knew the Carmen. Now, if one then thinks of the deathbed scene, the death scene, sorry, or the killing scene, Harold is both, whichever body it is, he's being hacked down, which is not dissimilar from what the Carmen says, and it's also not dissimilar from what William of Malmesbury suggests. So I rather like the idea, but this will go on and on and on, this particular debate, that Harold may well have been hit by an arrow. If he was hit by an arrow in the eye, it would have been immediately fatal. But perhaps he wasn't hit through the eye, but he was wounded, and then he was hacked down. I think the only certainty in all of this is that from William's perspective, killing Harold was, alongside, of course, defeating his army, after that, proceeding to kill Harold was a necessary part of his objectives.
Yeah, I think that given the propaganda role played by the tapestry, it's very likely that Odo had every intention to play on the symbolism behind that scene with if that was actually the depiction in the original scene with the arrow piercing Harold's eye, because this represented that God punished him for breaking his promise, his oath.
From William's point of view, yes, Harold had broken promises. Yeah, and that actually, I mean, this is in so many ways, this is politics as we've always known it, isn't it?
Yeah.
William has to put forward what he believes is the argument to justify himself, and others will do the same. So the tapestry is not just saying Harold deserved to die. It is presenting a narrative which can at times make us think, and this is often observed, that Harold was a nobleman who made mistakes, or at least was defeated, possibly because God willed it. Yeah.
Um, in uh, in your recent book dedicated to William, you argue that his superior generalship at both the tactical and strategic level enabled the Normans to win the Battle of Hastings. Could you please expound on that?
The way in which he was able to force Harold into battle, the way in which his troops then remained very disciplined in being able to conduct the feigned retreats or the pretended retreats, the way in which he went on to the attack when the English army was becoming disorganized, and also the way in which, I mean, this is in everything, the Carmen, in William of Poitiers, and in on the tapestry, the way in which you see him rallying the troops, which shows how personally involved he was. Yeah, so it's well, in the end, given William's military record over his entire lifetime, it's impossible not to think that he was a very good general. He certainly was, but I think he did. I think it is true to say he out generaled Harold. On the other hand, Harold may have become overconfident because of having already won the battle against Harold Hardrada at Stamford Bridge.